a quiet suburban neighborhood, nestled between rows of neatly trimmed lawns and freshly painted houses, lived Marcus. He was an ordinary man with an extraordinary heart. While most people in the area spent their weekends relaxing or running errands, Marcus often found himself drawn to helping others. Whether it was fixing a broken fence for a neighbor, mowing the lawn of a single mother who worked long hours, or simply lending an ear to someone going through tough times, Marcus had earned a reputation as the go-to guy for anything that required a helping hand. One sunny Saturday morning, Marcus woke up early, just like he usually did. The air was crisp, and there was a slight chill in the breeze. A perfect day for outdoor work. As he sipped his coffee on the front porch, he noticed something unusual across the street. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived alone, was struggling to pull weeds from her overgrown garden. Her once pristine yard now looked neglected, almost forgotten. It wasn't hard to guess why. Her son Daniel used to take care of these things before life threw him a curveball. Daniel had lost his job months ago, and since then money had been tight for the family. They couldn't afford to hire help, and Mrs. Thompson, frail and aging, could barely manage even the simplest tasks around the house. Seeing her struggle tugged at Marcus's heartstrings. He knew how proud Mrs. Thompson was. She wouldn't ask for help unless absolutely necessary. But Marcus also knew that pride shouldn't stand in the way of kindness. So, after finishing his coffee, he hopped into his truck and drove to his brother's place to borrow a power washer. His plan? To give Mrs. Thompson's home a much-needed facelift by cleaning its grimy exterior walls. When Marcus arrived back at Mrs. Thompson's house, she was sitting on her porch, fanning herself with an old magazine. She looked exhausted but tried to smile when she saw him approaching. "Marcus, what brings you here today?" she asked, her voice warm despite her tired eyes. "I thought I'd lend a hand," Marcus replied casually, setting the power washer down beside him. "Your house could use a little refresh, don't you think?" Mrs. Thompson hesitated for a moment. "Oh, Marcus, you don't have to do that. I'll get to it eventually." "Eventually might be too late," Marcus joked lightly, flashing her a reassuring grin. "Besides, it's no trouble at all. Let me handle it. You've done enough already." Reluctantly, Mrs. Thompson agreed, though not without expressing her gratitude multiple times. With everything set up, Marcus got to work. The machine roared to life as he aimed the nozzle at the side of the house. Dirt and grime that had accumulated over years began washing away, revealing the original color of the paint underneath. It felt good to see progress so quickly. Every spray of water seemed to wash away not just the dirt, but also the weight of neglect that had settled over the property. As Marcus worked, he couldn't help but reflect on how unfair life could sometimes be. Here was Mrs. Thompson, a kind and gentle soul who had always been generous with her time and resources, now struggling because of circumstances beyond her control. And yet, she never complained. She carried her burdens silently, with grace and dignity. It made Marcus admire her even more, and fueled his determination to make a difference, however small. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and sweat poured down Marcus's face. Still, he pressed on, moving methodically from one section of the house to another. The transformation was remarkable. What had started as a dull, dirty facade was slowly turning into a bright, welcoming home again. Passers-by occasionally stopped to watch, some offering words of encouragement. A few kids riding bikes even cheered him on, which brought a smile to Marcus's face. But just as he was starting to feel satisfied with his progress, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway caught his attention. Looking up, Marcus saw a shiny black sedan come to a halt. Two men stepped out, dressed in professional attire and wearing vests labeled HOA compliance officers. Their arrival sent a jolt of unease through Marcus's body. Something about their stern expressions and purposeful strides told him this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. Despite the sudden tension, Marcus forced himself to remain calm. After all, he hadn't done anything wrong. Or so he thought. Little did he know this encounter would turn his simple act of kindness into something far more complicated than he ever imagined. As the two men in official-looking vests approached, Marcus turned off the power washer and wiped his hands on his jeans. He could feel his heart beating a little faster, but he tried to stay composed. The taller of the two men held a clipboard tightly against his chest, while the other carried a small camera, already snapping photos of the scene. Their expressions were serious, almost too serious for what Marcus assumed was just a routine check. "Good afternoon," Marcus greeted them politely, forcing a smile despite the sinking feeling in his gut. "Can I help you with something?" The taller man glanced at his partner before addressing Marcus. His tone was clipped and formal, lacking any warmth or friendliness. "Are you the owner of this property?" he asked, pointing toward Mrs. Thompson's house without making eye contact. "No, I'm not," Marcus replied evenly. "I'm helping out a neighbor. Why do you ask?" The shorter man stepped forward, holding up his camera as if it were some kind of authority badge. "We've received reports of unauthorized activity taking place here. This is a violation of HOA guidelines." His voice had an accusatory edge, as though Marcus had been caught red-handed committing a crime. Marcus blinked, taken aback by the accusation. Unauthorized activity? All he was doing was cleaning the outside of a house. How could that possibly be considered wrong? Before he could respond, Mrs. Thompson appeared at the doorway, clutching her cane tightly. Her face was pale, and she looked visibly shaken. "What's going on here?" she asked nervously, her voice trembling slightly. "Marcus is only trying to help me. My yard hasn't been tended to in months, and my house needed cleaning. He didn't mean any harm." The taller inspector turned his attention to Mrs. Thompson, his demeanor softening ever so slightly, but only because she was elderly. "Ma'am, we understand your situation, but these activities fall under HOA regulations. Any modifications or maintenance work must be approved beforehand. Even something as simple as power washing requires permission." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened in disbelief. "Permission? For what? Keeping my home clean? I didn't know I needed permission to keep my own house looking decent." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, fueled by frustration and indignation. "And besides, Marcus isn't charging me anything. He's doing this out of kindness." The inspectors exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. The taller one sighed deeply, as though dealing with people like Mrs. Thompson and Marcus was the most exhausting part of his job. "Look, ma'am, we're just enforcing the rules. If exceptions are made for one person, then everyone will expect the same treatment. That's not how communities function." Marcus listened intently, his jaw tightening. Something about the way they spoke rubbed him the wrong way. It wasn't just their rigid adherence to rules, it was the lack of empathy, the complete disregard for the human element behind those rules. Here was an elderly woman struggling to maintain her dignity, and instead of offering solutions, these men were treating her like a troublemaker. "Excuse me," Marcus interjected firmly, stepping closer to the inspectors. "I don't think anyone here is trying to cause problems. I saw a neighbor in need and decided to help. Isn't that what living in a community is supposed to be about? Looking out for each other?" The shorter inspector raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Community spirit is important, yes, but so is following the guidelines that ensure order and uniformity. Without rules, things can quickly spiral out of control." Marcus resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Uniformity? Was that really more important than kindness? He wanted to argue further, but Mrs. Thompson placed a gentle hand on his arm, silently urging him to calm down. She looked tired, almost defeated, and Marcus realized that continuing the argument might only upset her more. Instead, he took a deep breath and addressed the inspectors again. "Okay, fine. What happens now? Am I in trouble for helping someone? Do I need to fill out paperwork or get approval retroactively?" The taller inspector flipped through the pages on his clipboard, pretending to review something important. After a moment, he looked up and said, "Technically, yes, there should have been prior authorization. However, since the work has already been done, we'll document the incident and issue a warning. But if this happens again without proper clearance, there will be consequences." Consequences. The word hung heavy in the air, leaving both Marcus and Mrs. Thompson feeling uneasy. Consequences for what? For showing compassion? For lending a hand when someone needed it most? It all seemed absurd, but arguing further wouldn't change their minds. Reluctantly, Marcus nodded, signaling that he understood. Once the inspectors finished taking notes and photographs, they climbed back into their sedan and drove away, leaving behind a cloud of tension. Marcus watched them go, shaking his head, in disbelief. He couldn't believe what had just happened. In his mind, he had been doing something good, something noble. Yet, somehow he'd managed to attract scrutiny from people who cared more about rules than relationships. Mrs. Thompson sank onto the porch steps, her shoulders slumped. "Oh, Marcus, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. You were just trying to help, and now you're getting dragged into this mess because of me." Marcus knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't apologize, Mrs. Thompson. None of this is your fault. Helping you was the right thing to do, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Those inspectors, they don't see the bigger picture. They're stuck on technicalities, but that doesn't mean we have to let them dictate how we treat each other." Mrs. Thompson managed a weak smile, though worry still lingered in her eyes. "You're a good man, Marcus, but I hate the thought of you getting into trouble because of me." Marcus stood up, brushing dirt off his knees. "Don't worry about me. I'll figure it out. For now, let's finish the job. Your house deserves to look its best, and no amount of bureaucracy is going to stop us from making that happen." With renewed determination, Marcus picked up the power washer and resumed his work. Though the encounter with the inspectors had left a bitter taste in his mouth, it hadn't dampened his spirit. If anything, it had strengthened his resolve. He knew that standing up for kindness, even in the face of resistance, was worth every ounce of effort. And as the water sprayed against the walls, washing away layers of grime, Marcus couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be the end of the story. Word of the incident spread through the neighborhood faster than Marcus could have imagined. By the time he finished power washing Mrs. Thompson's house, several neighbors had already heard about the confrontation with the HOA inspectors. Some stopped by to offer their support, while others whispered among themselves, unsure of what to make of the situation. The tension in the air was palpable, and it seemed like everyone had an opinion. That evening, as Marcus sat on his porch sipping a cold drink, he found himself replaying the day's events over and over in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at stake here, not just for him or Mrs. Thompson, but for the entire community. The inspectors' rigid enforcement of rules felt like a symptom of a larger problem, a growing disconnect between people and the values that truly mattered, like kindness, empathy, and mutual aid. Just as he was lost in thought, there was a knock at his door. Standing outside was Sarah, a young lawyer who lived a few houses down. She had recently moved into the neighborhood and hadn't interacted much with anyone until now. Her presence surprised Marcus, but her warm smile immediately put him at ease. "Hey, Marcus," she said, holding out a plate of cookies. "I brought these as a thank you for everything you've done today, for Mrs. Thompson and for standing up to those inspectors. I heard what happened and I wanted to see if there's anything I can do to help." Marcus accepted the plate gratefully, though he was still puzzled. "Thanks, Sarah. That's really kind of you. But honestly, I'm not sure how much help I need right now. It's just frustrating, you know. I didn't think helping someone would land me in hot water." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "I get it. Rules are important, but they're supposed to serve the community, not suffocate it. From what I've heard, the HOA has been getting stricter lately, and it's starting to alienate people. You're not the first to complain about them." Her word struck a chord with Marcus. He had always assumed that most residents were content with the way things were run, but as he listened to Sarah, he realized that many people might feel the same way he did. They just hadn't spoken up yet. Maybe this was an opportunity to spark a conversation, to bring attention to the issues simmering beneath the surface. Over the next few days, Marcus reached out to some of his neighbors, sharing his experience and asking for their thoughts. To his surprise, he discovered that a lot of people shared his frustrations. There was Linda, a single mother who had been fined for planting flowers that weren't on the HOA-approved list. Then there was Mr. Patel, whose request to install solar panels had been denied because they didn't match the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Even Sarah admitted that she'd had trouble getting approval for minor renovations when she first moved in. The more stories Marcus heard, the clearer it became that the HOA's policies were creating unnecessary barriers between residents and their ability to improve their homes, and in some cases their lives. What started as a simple act of kindness toward Mrs. Thompson had unexpectedly uncovered a deeper divide within the community. Determined to address the issue, Marcus decided to organize a meeting. With Sarah's help, he drafted a flyer inviting neighbors to gather at the local park to discuss their concerns. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people showed up eager to share their experiences and brainstorm solutions. The atmosphere was lively but respectful, with everyone taking turns speaking. Some voiced anger, others expressed sadness, but all agreed that change was needed. Sarah took charge of facilitating the discussion, using her legal expertise to guide the group. The HOA exists to protect property values and maintain standards, she explained. But those goals shouldn't come at the expense of human connection and compassion. If we want to challenge their decisions, we need to present a united front and propose reasonable alternatives. Together, they came up with a plan. They would draft a petition outlining specific changes they wanted to see, such as allowing small acts of community service without prior approval and revisiting fines that seemed excessive or unfair. The petition would also emphasize the importance of fostering goodwill and cooperation within the neighborhood. As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, he saw a glimmer of hope. The community wasn't as divided as it seemed. People simply needed a platform to voice their concerns. And now, thanks to the momentum building around the petition, they had a chance to make their voices heard. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The HOA board was notoriously resistant to change, and challenging their authority was no small feat. Still, Marcus knew that staying silent wasn't an option. If nothing else, this experience had taught him that even the smallest acts of defiance could inspire others to stand up for what they believed in. Back at home, Marcus spent hours refining the wording of the petition, ensuring it was clear, concise, and respectful. He wanted to appeal to the board's sense of reason, not provoke further conflict. When it was finally ready, he distributed copies throughout the neighborhood, encouraging everyone to sign and share it with others. Meanwhile, Mrs. Thompson continued to express her gratitude, though she remained worried about the potential fallout. "Marcus, I don't want you to lose your home or get into financial trouble because of me," she said one afternoon as they sat together on her porch. Marcus reassured her with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Thompson, none of this is your fault." Helping. "You reminded me of why communities exist, to lift each other up, not tear each other down. If standing up for that principle means facing a little pushback, then so be it. Besides, look at what's happening now. People are coming together, talking openly, and supporting one another. That's worth any risk." Mrs. Thompson nodded, slowly, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're a remarkable man, Marcus. I only hope the HOA sees that too." As the days passed, anticipation grew. The petition gathered signatures rapidly, and soon it represented nearly half the households in the neighborhood. Armed with this show of solidarity, Marcus and a small group of supporters prepared to present their case at the next HOA board meeting. Though nerves ran high, there was also a sense of excitement, a belief that real change might actually be possible. For Marcus, the journey had transformed from a personal act of kindness into something far greater. It was no longer just about power washing a house or helping a neighbor in need. It was about proving that compassion and community spirit could overcome even the strictest rules and regulations. And as he looked around at the faces of those who had joined him in this fight, he knew they were ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The day of the HOA board meeting arrived, and Marcus felt a mix of nerves and determination as he walked into the community center. The room was already buzzing with energy, residents packed shoulder to shoulder, some sitting on folding chairs arranged in rows, others standing along the walls. It wasn't just the usual attendees. People who rarely participated in neighborhood matters had shown up, united by a shared desire for change. Marcus spotted Sarah near the front, organizing papers and going over last-minute details with a few other supporters. She gave him an encouraging nod when she saw him enter. Mrs. Thompson was there too, seated near the back with her cane resting against her chair. Her presence meant a lot to Marcus. It reminded him why all of this mattered. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and joined the group at the front. The meeting began with the usual formalities: roll call, approval of minutes from previous meetings, and updates on upcoming projects. But it was clear that everyone in the room was waiting for the main event, the discussion about the petition and the recent incidents involving Marcus and other residents. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the board president called for public comments. Sarah stood first, introducing herself and explaining the purpose of the petition. "We're here today not to criticize the HOA outright," she said, calmly but firmly, "but to propose thoughtful changes that align with the values of our community. Many of us feel that current policies are too rigid and fail to account for acts of kindness, creativity, and individuality. We believe there's a way to maintain standards while fostering a more compassionate and inclusive environment." Her words were met with murmurs of agreement from the crowd. When she finished speaking, she gestured for Marcus to step forward. This was his moment, the culmination of weeks of effort and reflection. As he approached the podium, he could feel dozens of eyes on him. His heart pounded, but he reminded himself of the reason he was standing there, to stand up for something bigger than himself. "Good evening, everyone," Marcus began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "My name is Marcus, and I live right here in this neighborhood. A few weeks ago, I did something I thought was pretty simple. I helped my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, clean the exterior of her house. She's an elderly woman who's been struggling to keep up with maintenance because her family's going through tough times. All I wanted to do was lend a hand to make her home look nice again and give her a little peace of mind." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was silent, every person hanging on his next sentence. But instead of being thanked or supported, I was confronted by HOA inspectors who told me I was violating rules. Rules that frankly don't make sense in situations like this. Since then, I've learned that I'm not alone. Many of you have faced similar frustrations: fines for planting flowers, rejections for eco-friendly upgrades, penalties for small improvements that should be celebrated, not punished. Marcus glanced around the room, making eye contact with familiar faces. He saw Linda nodding vigorously, tears welling up in her eyes. Mr. Patel leaned forward, listening intently. Even Mrs. Thompson dabbed at her cheeks with a tissue, clearly moved. "I'm not saying we shouldn't have guidelines," Marcus continued. "Guidelines can help create harmony and protect property values. But when those guidelines start stifling compassion and goodwill, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of community are we building? Are we creating a place where people feel valued and supported? Or are we turning our neighborhood into a place ruled by fear of breaking arbitrary rules?" His voice grew stronger, more passionate. Helping someone in need isn't a violation, it's a virtue. Acts of kindness shouldn't require permission slips or inspections. If we truly want to build a strong, connected community, we need to prioritize empathy over enforcement. That's why we've drafted this petition. It's signed by hundreds of your neighbors, and it calls for common-sense reforms that allow us to live together with dignity and respect. When Marcus finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. People clapped enthusiastically, some even cheering. For a brief moment, Marcus felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for the collective courage of everyone who had come together to demand change. He stepped back, allowing Sarah to take the floor once more. Sarah addressed the board directly, presenting the petition and summarizing its key points. She emphasized that the proposed changes weren't radical. They were practical adjustments designed to strike a balance between structure and humanity. For example, one suggestion was to create a community service exception clause that would permit residents to perform minor tasks like painting, gardening, or power washing without prior approval, if done as a gesture of goodwill. Another proposal involved establishing a review committee made up of residents to evaluate fines and disputes fairly. As Sarah spoke, the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Some scribbled notes furiously, while others stared blankly ahead, seemingly unsure how to respond. The tension in the room was thick, but it wasn't hostile, it was hopeful. Residents waited anxiously for the board's reaction, wondering whether their voices would finally be heard. Finally, the board president cleared her throat and addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for coming tonight and sharing your thoughts," she said cautiously. "It's clear that many of you feel strongly about these issues, and we appreciate the effort you've put into drafting this petition. However, changing policies isn't something we can do overnight. These decisions require careful consideration and consensus." Her response was met with groans and murmurs of disappointment. Marcus clenched his fists briefly, frustrated by the lack of immediate action. But before anyone could protest, another board member chimed in. "That said," he added, "we understand the concerns raised here today. We'll take this feedback under advisement and schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss potential revisions to our guidelines." Though the board's reply was vague, it was enough to keep the momentum going. As the meeting adjourned, residents lingered in the parking lot, chatting excitedly about what had transpired. Many expressed gratitude to Marcus and Sarah for spearheading the effort, while others vowed to stay involved until meaningful change was achieved. Later that evening, as Marcus sat on his porch reflecting on the day's events, he realized how much had shifted, not just in terms of policy but in the spirit of the community itself. People who had once kept to themselves were now connecting, sharing stories, and working toward a common goal. The HOA might still be resistant, but the tide was turning. And for Marcus, that was proof that even the smallest acts of defiance could spark something extraordinary. Mrs. Thompson stopped by later that night, her face glowing with gratitude. "You've done so much for all of us, Marcus," she said softly. "Not just for me, but for everyone. Don't ever doubt that." Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "We did this together, Mrs. Thompson. Every single person who signed that petition, showed up tonight, or spoke out made a difference. This is just the beginning." Weeks passed after the HOA board meeting, and the neighborhood buzzed with anticipation. Residents eagerly awaited the follow-up session where the board promised to revisit the proposed changes. In the meantime, something remarkable began happening. People started acting differently. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves were now chatting over fences, exchanging gardening tips, or simply stopping to say hello. The petition and Marcus's speech had ignited a spark of unity that hadn't existed before. One sunny afternoon, as Marcus was working in his own yard, he noticed a group of teenagers gathering near Mrs. Thompson's house. At first, he thought, they might be causing trouble, but then he saw them pulling weeds, trimming bushes, and raking leaves. It turned out that these kids, inspired by Marcus's actions, had decided to organize a neighborhood cleanup day. They brought gloves, trash bags, and tools, determined to make their community look its best, not because the HOA demanded it, but because they wanted to. Mrs. Thompson watched from her porch, tears streaming down her face. She called out to the teens, thanking them profusely and offering lemonade from her kitchen. The sight warmed Marcus's heart. What had started as a simple act of kindness was now blossoming into a movement, a shared commitment to care for one another and the place they called home. The follow-up HOA meeting finally arrived, and this time the turnout was even larger than before. Residents filled every seat in the room, spilling into the hallway outside. There was an air of optimism mixed with cautious hope. Everyone knew that real change wouldn't come easily, but they also believed their voices couldn't be ignored any longer. The board president opened the meeting by acknowledging the feedback they'd received since the last session. "We've spent considerable time reviewing your petition and discussing the concerns raised," she said, her tone more conciliatory than usual. "While we can't implement all the changes immediately, we've agreed on several key adjustments that we believe strike a balance between maintaining standards and fostering goodwill." She proceeded to outline the new policies. A community service exception clause allowing residents to perform small acts of assistance, like painting, gardening, or cleaning, without prior approval, provided it benefits someone in need. The establishment of a resident-led review committee to evaluate fines and disputes fairly. Relaxation of certain aesthetic rules, such as approving eco-friendly upgrades like solar panels and drought-resistant plants without excessive red tape. The announcement was met with thunderous applause. People hugged each other, cheered, and wiped away tears of relief. It wasn't everything they had asked for, but it was a significant step forward, a testament to the power of persistence and collective action. After the meeting, Sarah approached Marcus, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Marcus. You really did it. This is a win for everyone." Marcus shook his head modestly. "No, we did it. Every person who signed the petition, showed up to meetings, or lent a hand made this possible. I just happened to be the one holding the microphone." As word spread about the policy changes, the neighborhood transformed even further. More residents began volunteering their time and skills to help those in need. Someone organized a weekend workshop to teach basic home repairs, while another set up a free tool-sharing program so everyone could access equipment for maintenance projects. Even the HOA inspectors seemed softer in their approach, focusing less on penalties and more on collaboration. Mrs. Thompson's house became a symbol of this newfound spirit. Her once neglected yard was now vibrant with colorful flowers planted by neighbors, and her freshly cleaned walls gleamed in the sunlight. Whenever anyone walked past, they couldn't help but smile. It was a reminder of how far they'd come and what they could achieve when they worked together. For Marcus, life returned to a quieter rhythm, though he remained active in the community. He continued helping others whenever he could, knowing that small gestures often led to big changes. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, Sarah joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "You know," she said, handing him one of the cups, "this whole thing has made me rethink why I moved here in the first place. I thought it was just about finding a nice place to live, but now I see it's about the people, the connections we build, and the impact we have on each other's lives." Marcus nodded, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "Yeah, it's funny how one little decision can ripple outward. All I wanted to do was help Mrs. Thompson, and look where it led us. Sometimes I wonder if things would have turned out differently if those inspectors hadn't shown up that day." Sarah chuckled. "Maybe not. Maybe you'd still be doing what you always do, quietly making the world a better place. But having the HOA challenge, you gave everyone else permission to speak up too. You lit a fire under us, Marcus. And now, well, I think our neighborhood is stronger because of it." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Marcus reflected on the journey they'd been through. It hadn't been easy. There had been frustration, uncertainty, and moments of doubt, but it had been worth it. The HOA might have started as an obstacle, but in the end, it had forced the community to confront deeper questions about what truly mattered. In the weeks and months that followed, the neighborhood thrived. New friendships formed, old divisions healed, and a sense of belonging took root. The HOA itself underwent subtle shifts, becoming less authoritarian and more collaborative. While the rules were still important, they no longer overshadowed the humanity behind them. And as for Marcus, he carried on living his life with the same quiet determination that had defined him from the start. He didn't seek recognition or praise. He simply believed in doing what was right. Yet unbeknownst to him, his actions had left an indelible mark on the hearts of those around him. His story served as a reminder that kindness, courage, and community could overcome even the strictest barriers, and that sometimes bending the rules wasn't about breaking order but creating opportunities for love and connection to flourish. At the end, the neighborhood wasn't just a collection of houses. It was a tapestry woven together by shared experiences, mutual support, and the unwavering belief that compassion should always triumph over bureaucracy. And in that realization, everyone found a renewed sense of purpose and a brighter future for the community they cherished.